Alright, here we are, Kente Marina. So I find it incredibly fascinating that I was talking with a woman that I was sitting next to on my flight down here, and she just thought it was scary but amazing that I was traveling down here solo by myself, not really speaking Spanish, not really knowing anybody, and just coming down to not only travel around Pisac for a couple of days, but also to go and do the 10-day retreat with Paititi Institute. And she could not wrap her head around doing it, and part of it, she said, was her fear of being alone. And granted, I can see from a different perspective of being a woman, it probably is significantly more scary by traveling solo, but even as a guy, you know, there's still things that can happen. And before I went on this hike, I was talking with my wife on the phone, and she just said, well, make sure and be extra careful. You're going to be all by yourself, and you know, you're in a place that you don't speak the language, and you don't know the people, and you don't know where you're going. But all of that is coming from fear. And we live in, especially in the Western culture, we live from such a standpoint of fear and just purely based on that fight or flight instinct so much of our lives that it stops us from doing so many amazing things. And a couple of years ago, I took my very first solo trip to Glastonbury, England. And now, England, I speak the language, you know, it was pretty easy to get around because everywhere had Wi-Fi, so I easily was able to use maps and things like that. And I also had some people that were meeting me there, and I was going there for a 5-day Reiki Masters course in Glastonbury, which I ended up getting my final initiation in the middle of Stonehenge, which was an absolutely remarkable experience, but that's kind of another story for another day. And that one trip really opened my eyes to how we really don't need to have a lot of fear when it comes to the rest of the world. Most cultures just want to show you anything and everything about your culture. And the family that I'm staying at, their house where they have a hostel, you know, I've been helping prepare the meals last night and this morning for breakfast. And, you know, all they want to do is show their culture and show what they know and help pass that on to somebody else that can appreciate that. And that has been my main experience. Even the taxi cab driver who drove me from Cusco to here in Pisac, which was an hour drive, he didn't speak a lick of English. And we just kind of made it work. And he pointed out some things that you'll probably see in the previous video that I'm going to cut together of the trip here. And you know, all he wanted to do was show his culture, show the country that he's from. And at no point in time was I fearful of, like, gosh, is this guy going to pull off in the middle of nowhere and rob me and take all of my bags and things like that? It was just like, you know what? I'm on this cool trip with this guy. Granted, his driving was a little crazy, but I used to drive a little crazy myself, so it didn't really bother me that much. But it really makes me realize that we really need to remove a lot of that fear towards other cultures, and especially the Western media does a very, very good job of making the world seem like an incredibly scary place, but it's not. You know, most cultures just want to show everything that they have to offer, and it just makes me incredibly grateful for staying in the place that I'm at. Granted, you know, it's not the Ritz, it's not a Hilton hotel, you know, there's a crack in the side of my door that lets in a breeze at night, but you know what? It's part of the experience of being here in this country and experiencing how these people live day to day, and it really kind of makes you look at life in a different light because they are living so much more simply and have so many less things than what we as Westerners feel we need to have in order to be happy. You know, we need to have the latest and greatest cars, a newer, you know, bigger TV with a fancy sound system, and need to have a bigger house. And once we get that big house, we'll live in it for a couple of years, and then we sell it and hopefully make a little bit of money so we can buy an even bigger house and have a fancier car. And it's this perpetual cycle of fucking nonsense, you know, excuse my language, but it really has started to make me realize that I spent the entirety of my 20s making realistically, looking back on it, close to $1 million. And now all I really have to show for it is a 68 Beetle that I did a restoration on a couple of years, and a 99 bus that my wife and I converted. And you know what? We're happy. We're happy with all of that. Instead of having multiple cars and, a big lavish sound system and a nice house, we're trying to sell our house so that we have less hanging over our heads, so we can really truly enjoy traveling around in our tiny house school bus conversion and enjoy life for what it is, instead of having to feel like we've got to work so hard every single day just to pay for all of these bills. And maybe we get to take 1 or 2 vacations a year, maybe not. It all depends upon how finances worked out. Whereas now, here I am in Pisac, Peru, enjoying myself and going to go on a 10-day retreat that I've been dreaming about for years. And the funny thing about it is that this retreat is like 3 times less expensive than the retreats that I was looking at when I was making a bunch of money, because I knew that I could probably work just a few extra jobs to be able to afford it. Whereas I sold my truck that I owned outright, and I used some of those profits to pay for this trip, and the airfare that came down here all came from points accrued from our credit card, so it's like that was free. So it's all about kind of trying to formulate your life in a way that you can really truly enjoy it, instead of feeling like you're constantly having to grind and grind and grind and grind just to be able to have a living and somewhat survive. Life is not about surviving. Life is about living. That's why it's called life. And so the more we can learn to be grateful for what we already have, instead of constantly wanting more and more and more, I think the happier and happier that we will get. And I think we are getting there as a society. I feel like I talk to more and more people, and maybe it's just my own personal shift in mindset is bringing the people that think more like me into my life, so that I can continue this, perpetual growth and coming from more of a place of love and compassion and gratitude, instead of want and desire and fear, where I do again feel like most of society kind of lives from. So I really feel like a lesson learned, especially from just trekking around in the mountain today by myself, is just like, we don't need a lot to be happy. All we need is to be able to have awesome experiences, have awesome people around us, and just live life as authentically as we possibly can.